So let's start making the blocks. The first thing we need to do is go to the game scene and add a level manager. We need to add that script, right? So I'm going to create an empty, call it level manager, and add the script. Okay. I'm going to make a quick change. I want to test something out just to show that. So in this level setup, I want to print the level. So I'm going to say level, I want to see the number, and what is it, level num? Level num. So if I go and test this out, I should see that number. So if I go back to the scenes menu and I'm going to test this out, I'm going to click level 1, back, level 2, back, level 3, and now if I go to the console, I should see those numbers, right? Okay, here they are. I had to look for them, but you see, so we have, every time we click the button, we enter that function and we got the right number. Okay, so now we need to make these blocks, but we need a prefab. So what we're going to do is we're going to make, we're going to take one of these sprites, doesn't matter really which one now, but I'm going to take this hidden, I'm going to drag it over to the scene, and there it is, and I'm going to drag it, oops, into the folder prefabs. So this is like a template that we're going to use, and technically we don't need this anymore in the scene, but this is our prefab. I'm going to call it block prefab. So this is what we're going to use to generate all the blocks. We are going to add one component over here, a box collider 2D. And that is, the reason we need that is because we want this to be clickable later, okay? And then the next thing we need is we need to make a script for this. So let's go to the scripts, and we're going to make a new script called block, right? And let's open that up. And right now, well, we're not going to really, well, right now we're not going to, let me see. Well, let's put some variables in here. So let's set this up, right? So the first, we're going to need some variables. So I'm going to do a region here again. Variables. And we're going to put some variables in here. So here they are. The first one is every block has a sprite renderer, so we're going to get a reference to it, right? Every block has a row and column. We need for every block to know if it has a mine or not, right? And for the gameplay, we also need to know how many mines are around it, right? And the other thing is it playable? So once you click on it and you reveal a number or that there's no mines around it, we don't want to be able to click on this again. Okay, let's continue. The other thing is we need to know the state of the block. This has to do with this, the sprite. So this is going to be very important because these sprites on these blocks can change. So we need to know what state the game is on or the level is on. Okay, I think I could bring this down a little bit. Okay, next in start, we need to initialize these variables, right? So when the block is instantiated, so we're going to get the sprite. And the reason we're getting the sprite renderer is because we're going to be changing these images a lot, and we don't want to be, we want to have a reference to the sprite renderer at all times. Okay, So at the beginning, it is playable. We have no mines at the beginning, right? We're going to set this later, and has a mine, and also it is hidden. So that's the original setup for the block. Okay, so the main function for the block will be something called show block sprites, right? And based on the game state, we're going to show different sprites and different color sprites too. So this is going to have to decide what to display based on the game state. And the key here is, we have these different sprites with different colors, if you win, if you lose, etc. Right? So we have to decide what to display. So the first case will be if you're just playing the game, right? If you're playing the game, you want to show those sprites that have no color, right? So we'll have a function called show play sprites, and that means it's not red or it's not green, right? So that's how we'll choose that sprite. The second case will be if you won the game. If you won the game, we're going to show you those the green sprites. And if you lost the game, we're going to show you the lose sprites. Okay, so let's get these functions. The first function is the play sprites, and this is how this is going to work, right? If you're playing the game, right? So you're playing the game, and if you have a mine, what we're going to do is we're going to go to the level, and we're going to get that sprite based on its name. So the name of the sprite, and we're going to go to the dictionary, and we're going to get that sprite, and it's a mine, right? So if you have a mine, we'll show it. The other thing, if you have no mine, if you click on a block and you want to reveal it, you have no mine, we want to show reveal play. So that's the one that's blank. Now the next one, if you do have some mines around you, we're going to get the mine count, and we're going to convert it into the sprite type. So the sprite type has in level, if you look at the level, what we're doing is we're converting a number into one of these, you see, into one of these based on a number. So if you have one mine, we're going to convert it to one play. If you have two mine, we're going to get two play, etc. Right? So that will show the number. Okay, the next function is if you won. So the only difference is that we're going to choose the green mine, and we're going to choose, if you're mine, we're going to choose the green empty. And also you notice this is the same as before, except we add 20. So what we're doing is we're increasing it by 20 to get to these, right? So it'll be 21. If you have one mine, we'll actually, by increasing it to 21 to 22, we'll show you these sprites, right? So that's why we broke this up into 20s and 40s. And the last one, of course, is the lost. So if you lost, everything here, the mine lost, right? Reveal lost, this is the red ones. And here we increase this by 40, so we get to the 41s and the 42s and the 43s, right? Okay, so that takes care of this region. Did I close this region up and region? So it's okay, this is not big enough to worry about. Now we made all these private, so to give other classes access to this, I'm going to make a region getters and setters, right? So the first one we'll put in is playable. So they'll have to go through this function, right, to set the playable, because if it's private, they cannot. So they have to use the uppercase is playable. If they try to use the lowercase, they won't be able to access this because it's private. Okay, I think I probably have curly brace missing. We'll see. Okay, let's do the others, right? So the others are pretty much the same, right? So we have is playable, we have has mine. See, we just used the capital version of this. So they have to go through this function. And the reason we're doing this is because we want to control access to our variables. We have row, we have column, we have mine count, same principle. We have a renderer, we have the block state. If they change the block state, by the way, we do update the block state, right? So this is another reason to use getters and setters, right? You can control what happens when they change a variable. And I think it's okay. I'm going to save. So that's our block script. Okay, now that we have the script, we need to add it to the block. So we're going to go back to the game. And we're going to go to our prefab, block prefab. And let's move down, and we're going to add a component. And we're going to type in block. And there's the script. Okay, so now the block is all set to go. So now that we have the block, let's make a few of them, right? So we go back to the level, and in the level, we are going to need a few more variables here related to the placement, right? So let's put these in, right? First of all, we need the prefab. Right, we need a prefab, and we're going to put that public so we can drag the prefab in. We also need to control the scale of the prefab, and there's a gap between them and an offset. So this all has to do with the placement, okay? So if I save this and I go to my scene and I go to the game scene, and I click on Level Manager, you see there's a slot here now for the prefab. So let me get my prefab and drag it in. Okay, so that takes care of that. And let's go back to the script. So what we need to do is we have this generate blocks. So we actually now are going to make these blocks, right? So we need to uncomment that out and make that function. Okay. So let's see, I have level set up here. I'll stay in here, and this is my level variable. So I'll make a new function here called generate blocks. So to make the blocks, we'll need a few variables, local variables. Now the first one is a block holder. When we make these blocks, they'll end up in the scene, and just to organize things, you know, so what happens if we make these blocks, they all end up over here. It gets a little cluttered. So to organize them a little better is to make an empty and put all the blocks into the empty, and then you can just open up and see all of them in there, right? So that's the first part, is we make an empty and all the blocks will go in there. This is just a local variable right now, and then we need to get a reference to all those blocks that we made, right? Because we want to play with them, we need a reference to them. So we have a matrix called all blocks. So let's make that variable, right? I think I can make it over here. So this will have a reference to all the blocks that we made. Actually, we're storing only the script in here, but through the script, we can get to the game object. Okay, so let's start making these blocks. So this is going to be a 3D matrix, right? So we need two loops. We need a row loop and a column loop, and this is going to go through rows and columns, right? So that's our nested loop. And the first thing we need to do for each block that we make is to calculate its position. So that has to do with the offset, and X and Y position will be based on the C, the value of C and R, its scale, and the gap that we want, right? So this will move these along on the X-axis, and this will move this along on the Y-axis, right? So this will be changing based on these values, right? So we need to set the position. Next, we need to actually make the block, right? So this is the Unity command that makes, or it's called instantiation. So the first thing is, you see, we say what template are we using. So we're using a block prefab, that's the object. So we're making a new one. We're setting its position through the vector, right? and we're indicating that it's a game object. So we're saving that game object with a reference here. So once we have the object, we need to do a few things with it, right? First thing is, as I said before, we need to put it into that empty. So we're going to take its parent and we're going to put it into the empty, so they're all nicely organized. And we're going to change the scale based on our scale setting. Okay, so we took care of the object. Now we need to get a reference to it for further use. So we're going to retrieve the component, the block component. Remember, that's a script on every prefab. We're going to get that component, and we're going to set its row and column, right? So every block, remember that function, row and column. So it's actually, you know, the getter and setter, but we're setting the variable here, right? So we're setting the row and column for the block. And then the other thing is we're adding the block to our matrix, right? Because this is going to be where all the blocks are stored, and this is how we're going to retrieve every block and work with it. Okay, I'm going to save and check my code. It looks like I didn't initialize this Y position. So I could do it right here. The Z position is just a number, but so int, is it an int or a float? I think it has to be a float. So float, Y position, and float Z, did I still get it wrong? Z position, Z position, make it 0, 0F. Okay, I want to save that, go back and see if those errors are gone. It looks like they're gone. Okay, I think we're ready to test this out, so let's go to the game, and I'm going to go to the scene, menu scene, and start with that, and we're going to look, and as we see, we're getting the blocks, but they're a little too large and the offset, so we have to play around with that, right? So let's look at these scales, right? So playing around a little bit, I found out this is not too bad, 0.25 and 0.1 for the gap, right? But again, you have to play around with those numbers, right? We never really set this, so a good place to set this is the offset is right here. Once we set the variables, again, you could hard code that too for each one of your cases, right? You could say left offset equals some number. I'm using a formula though, so I'm going to use a formula depending on the columns and the scale and the gap and etc. So you could use a formula too, right? And I'm going to save that. And I'm going to see, based on that, how that works. So let me try that. But again, you just play around with the numbers, get what you like. So if I do level 1, you see, so it's right there in the middle. And if I do the last level, that's not too bad, right? It's not too bad. If I go to take a look at this, let me see. I'm gonna not minimize this. I'm gonna say don't maximize. So if I do, and I play level 3, and let me go to the scene. So interesting, right? How they're smaller when you don't maximize, but we'll work that out. Okay, so play around with those numbers and see what you get. Of course, now we have to actually click on them and make them work, right?